Bible and Tract Society back to the 1800s. You want to trace the origin, the genesis of the Seventh-day Adventists back to the 1800s. You want to deal with Mary Baker Eddy and the Christian Scientists back to the 1800s. Matter of fact, all of the major cultic groups that exist as parasites feeding off the Church of Jesus Christ all spawned in the 19th century. And as you examine the theology, be it the Christadelphians or whatever they are, you begin to find certain common doctrines. Certain things they hold together. These were men and women who lived at the same time in history. Did you know they even talked about each other? Joseph Smith referred to William Miller as Father Miller. Remember the man who set a date for Christ's return in 1843, in October? And you see, these people knew of each other, and they shared various theories, but when you begin to go up that stream, as if you're looking up a salmon stream, and you're going back to the spawning ground, you end up with what is called the Restoration Movement. Well, what was the Restoration Movement? It was a religious movement created by none other than Alexander Campbell, his father, Thomas Campbell, and then various other individuals such as Barton Stone and Walter Scott and others. And this religious movement, which not only ultimately created the Church of Christ, the Disciples of Christ, the Christian Church, and other different splinter groups, it also became the genesis for the Mormons. It also became the mother or the father to the Christadelphians, to the Jehovah's Witnesses, and to other cultic groups. Even as you think about the United Pentecostals that began after the so-called Pentecostal outbreak on Azusa Street there in California, you begin to discover that we would not have the Mormons running around if it was not for Alexander Campbell and what he taught. Jesus told us that we can examine a religious figure in terms of their fruit. And the fruit of the religious teaching and the concepts given by Alexander Campbell and his immediate cohorts, the fruits are evil. The fruits have done great damage. Now, if you have not had to deal with the Church of Christ people up to this point, you will shortly have to deal with them. They have announced that they are going to do a mass mailing to every single mailing address in the United States. And they're going to offer a Bible study. They're going to take out ads in Reader's Digest, just like the Mormons. And they've gotten smart, and they're going to spend millions of dollars to do this. So if you haven't had to deal with them before, you're going to have to deal with them now. They are an aggressive movement. They have a program in which they invite Southern families because they were primarily Southern. And they have them move up north and relocate. I have met multitudes of families from Tennessee, particularly from Texas, that have moved up to central Pennsylvania for the sole purpose of helping the local Church of Christ grow. Now, these are people who are not trained clergymen. They're not missionaries. They, matter of fact, in Brooklyn, I ran across an entire congregation that packed up and moved in order to evangelize. So if you have not dealt with the heirs and the children of Alexander Campbell, you will have to deal with them one day in the future. Now, in order to set the perimeters, or to give us a brief framework on this whole discussion of baptismal regeneration, which is a phrase that was used by Alexander Campbell, so I do not have to apologize for quoting what he said. We're going to look briefly at history. The Restoration Movement is based upon the following points. Number one, the Christian church disappeared in the first century and did not resurface until Alexander Campbell. This immediately means there were no Christian churches. Now, you must remember that the Roman Catholic Church in Vatican I drew a circle and said, this is the body of Christ. Outside of the body of Christ, there is no salvation. Then they drew another circle. This is the Roman Catholic Church. And the body of Christ and the Roman Catholic Church are one and the same. And outside of the church, there is no salvation. Thankfully, in Vatican II, they changed that and said, this is the body of Christ. And then they drew a smaller circle. This is the Roman Catholic Church. And the Protestant churches thus are parts of the body of Christ. And we became separated brethren instead of heretics. But the cultic groups, be it the Campbellites, the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, or whatever they are, have continued the old Vatican I teaching by saying and thinking their earthly, visible organization is synonymous with the body of Christ. You are not a Christian if you do not belong to their group. And the body of Christ thus has an address. It has a place you can send mail to. It has a street address, and you can drive up to it. And the Restorationists said the Christian church disappeared in the first century. At that time, the true gospel was lost and had not been preached all those years. Thus, secondly, the Roman Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox, and all Protestant churches are apostate organizations. They are not to be viewed as Christian churches, and those who attend there are not Christians. Now, you must understand the shell and pea game that the cults like to play. They all like to say, we are the only Christians, and you, Bob Morey, you're not a Christian. But then the moment you say to them, you are not a Christian, they say, oh, that's unloving and unkind. Won't you receive us as Christians? I've had that question. I had a Church of Christ pastor call me up.